Why do you think it's always the silent farts that stink and the loud ones are not as bad?
I think there's an inverse relationship between the volume or the decibel level of a fart and the stench level of a fart. You know, meaning that the louder it is, the less stench it has, the less stench it carries. But the quieter it is, the more stench it carries. I'm trying to figure out why. I'm wondering, is it a propulsion thing? Like maybe if it's, you know, you just have that much like power behind it that actually forces it outside of the room before anyone can even smell it.
That's true, because it could be that like the silent ones, they don't come out with as much ferocity, so they just kind of linger. So that's why like, when you walk around, you ever heard of cutting the tail? Like when if you rip you rip a quiet one, you gotta wave your hand across your butt to cut the trail.
Oh,
that way
I see.
You leave it somewhere, and you gotta leave.
I see. So when you do that, it just separates it, and you've got this little floating ball.
Yeah, but you got to get away from it, because if you don't cut the tail, it's gonna follow you, and they're gonna know.
That is a good tip.
Or
for anyone listening.
If you want to get some revenge, you could always crop dust. That's always fun.
Hey, welcome to ZEITGUYS. My name's Greg.
My name's Nick. We're back with more fart jokes.
Yep, not even jokes. That was actually really good life advice. These are life pro tips about farts.
Want to get back at someone? Crop dust them. Mm-hmm. They'll never know who it was. Just fart and walk.
You find yourself at an expensive dinner and then realize the oysters were not as fresh as you thought. Cut the tail.
Cut the tail
and you just leave little balls of fart just around the room, and you be nowhere near them. In fact, you go outside, you light a cigarette. As soon as somebody notices, you don't even need to smoke. You just need to have a lit cigarette. And somebody comes out like, "Oh man, it smells terrible." And then you're out there like, "Yeah, I don't know. I've been smoking out here for 20 minutes. I wonder how that happened."
I don't know. As soon as you light it, you just explode.
Yeah, because you just.
It's like, oh, I guess gotta go out here to pretend I'm smoking.
Yeah, and it all goes up in flames. Yeah, maybe not. That's a bad life pro tip.
Anyway, Greg.
Yeah.
Got a theory for you.
Good.
You might have heard of this one. It's an oldie, but a goodie. It's an oldie with a goodie.
We'll go for the classic theory today.
This is one of those like world-altering style theories that are...
I feel like you have a preference for those, which I appreciate actually, because I'm a little more like niche, but I think yours are all like, this is the end of everything, which
yours, I feel like,
part of it.
Are a lot more grounded in reality, and there are more of those conspiracies that you can think like, that might be real. But this one is like one of those ones that's like, it's one of those ones that has so much information over such a long time that you're like, how is this not real? But also, how is it real? Like, it's just like, come on.
Then I'm gonna give you the whole episode to do a full scale expose on this theory,
because this one is very much based in folklore as well, because it's very old. It started in the 17th century.
Oh, that old
is where it's based in. It's very old. It has since grown from there.
Okay.
It's based from old myths, old religions, old.
Is this about fairies?
No.
Okay.
Wait. No
okay.
fairies.
All right, no fairies. Gnomes. Those crafty little gnomes.
No, but giants.
Giants. Like me. That's my family.
Yeah. So this is about the story of the Gregorys.
The Gregory family.
Gregory and the Amazons.
But actually, you know what? That might be my family. My mother's
Wonder
from Brazil,
Greg?
And so like there might be some Amazon blood in me. I don't know. Maybe that's why I'm so tall.
I was gonna say this. This theory actually has some Brazilian folklore in it that I'm going to touch on.
Ooh, I might have actually heard this growing up as a kid, so this will be really interesting.
It's not as big, but it is there. It's not as prevalent, but it does show up in Brazilian culture, like ancient Brazilian culture.
Well, I'm going to metaphorically hand you the keys and let you take this baby out for a spin. Let's go.
Let me start you out with this. You ever heard of Hollow Earth?
I have.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about it? Tell me what you know as a base.
Idea?
Okay. What's your idea of Hollow Earth?
I mean, there's lots of ideas. When I think of Hollow Earth, I think of like Journey to the Center of the Earth, and they go down there and like there's like another Earth sort of.
You're right.
It's like another world, and they've got dinosaurs and crap.
And that's pretty much correct. Yeah. So and Journey to the Center of the Earth is based off of the guy who wrote that book. I think it was Jules Verne, right?
Actually, was it Jules Verne? He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
I think he did
Around the World in 80 Days. He might have. Let's fact check really quick. I think it was Jules Verne though. Actually, if you are looking for some writing to read, just kind of pick up a classic,
Yeah,
pick
yep.
up a Jules Verne collection. It's actually really well written.
They're really good.
Good stuff.
And yes, it was Jules Verne,
Oh,
and
nailed
it was written in 1864.
Yeah, he was
He
a
wrote
long
a
time
lot
ago.
of good fantasy books.
Yeah.
Did you know actually Disney based a lot of his movies and rides off of? They wanted to base a lot of Disney World's rides off of Jules Verne novels.
Yeah, because they did. Wasn't Disney the one that did Around the World in 80 Days?
Yep.
That was the Jules Verne novel.
And they did a 20
They did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea too. Yeah, you're right.
When Disney was alive, he was a huge Jules Verne's fan.
Oh, I get it, man. I've got it on my Kindle app. I've got like the whole complete works of Jules Verne.
Yeah, they're really cool stories. Like
Yeah.
they're like I know they're old, but they're really fun to read today. They're still good stories.
Yeah, and since we're getting into this literature club here, a little sooner than planned, but here we are. Another one, Arthur Conan Doyle. He wrote the Sherlock Holmes novels.
Right.
He has a less known novel called The Lost World. Man,
I feel like I've heard of that.
you got to read this one if you haven't. It's Arthur Conan Doyle, but basically it boils down to deep in the Amazon rainforest, which I guess resonated with me because I've been there. So deep in the Amazon rainforest, there's a plateau that is outside of time, like as in like everything from prehistoric times lived on this plateau. Very, very interesting. The Mysterious Island was Jules Verne novel too. That was another good one. I think they did do a movie of that. Anyway, let's just move on then.
Yeah, we gotta get this cranking. So
Yeah.
Hollow Earth is a theory that relates way back to the 17th freaking century, man. It is based, or even earlier than that, I think the 16th century. It starts back with the Greeks.
Oh, so way earlier than that.
Yeah. So basically, just to give the quick synopsis of how it kind of developed over time, is that the Greeks say that there were caverns that led to the underworld, and different gods lived down there.
Hades and whatnot.
Yes, and then and then it goes on to like Celtic mythology. Ireland had a gate to hell, like in the mountains, and in different catacombs they would just plummet straight down. They were most of the places related to the underworld, or like in Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
The 9 layers of hell consisted of going through the earth into like a boiling, like into like the fiery pits of hell. So it's like the core of the earth was very hot, as where the opposite of the
at the end, the final layer was actually frozen solid.
Right, which
but you're right.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
like that's,
it's all
that's the
based
gist of
in
it.
that.
He's in a meadow, and Virgil leads him into hell.
so
Also, very interesting read if you haven't read that since high school literature. Check it out.
it is interesting. It is harder to read because it is so
It's
old.
very old.
But it's also based. There's also stuff in Hindu and a lot of in the Middle Ages from like German myths. It's all kind of is about the same thing, traveling into the earth to get to some alternate spiritual plane, and a lot of it's just based in folklore.
Yeah.
But it starts getting more factual towards the 19th and 20th century when there's actual accounts of people visiting and returning from Hollow Earth. Some of them were proven to be debunked, but it relates back to places like the Bermuda Triangle is an entrance to Hollow Earth, is why so many things disappear, why Amelia Earhart disappeared.
Wait, is this what really happened to Amelia Earhart?
Possibly.
Dude,
Yeah.
we're going to blow this case wide open.
Yeah, and so there's also ones based in Native American mythology and the Brazilian. It says Brazilian Indians. I don't know.
The natives of Brazil.
It says those who lived alongside the Primeira River in Brazil claim that their forefathers emerged from ancient times from an underground land, that many of their ancestors still remain inside the earth. Ancestors of the Inca and located to the east of Cusco, Peru. So a lot of the Inca's ancestors and a lot of the Brazilians come from this land and inhabited the surface world. So again, a lot of this is just mythology and cool folklore. So then we start getting into the 18th century, the 17th and 18th century, with a man named Edmund Halley, who kind of gave it a scientific approach as to why this is. So
with a name like Edmund Halley, this guy does his research.
So he was a scientist. So let me, where am I looking? I have a lot of articles pulled up right here. Boop, beep, you. Yeah, so in the 17th century, Edmund Halley discovered one of the... so he discovered Halley's Comet.
Oh, that Edmund Halley.
Yeah.
Oh.
So he also kind of solidified this theory in science, kind of gave it a more scientific approach as to how this could be possible. So he believed that the Earth consisted of several concentric shells, all containing their own individual atmosphere, with the outermost, the layer we live on, being 500 miles thick of like different stones and stuff like that. Different stones, magma, lava, all that junk.
Because we can go down a fair depth.
Yeah, the farthest.
And recognize, like, this is the topsoil, this is the bedrock, all that.
All I know is that we haven't, the farthest we've drilled has not reached past the crust. We've had never reached, I don't know what the next layer is, but I think the deepest we've drilled without like going into a pre-made like cavern or anything, the deepest we've been able to dig, I think, is 10 miles without like us, without equipment like exploding due to pressure
or melting or whatever, because it would get too hot. Well, what's interesting, because I might be jumping ahead here, but wouldn't we be able to use like ultrasound equipment to be able to, like, instead of drilling down, but to actually like send sound waves through and see, if there's an echo or something down there, that's like, whoa.
Well, yeah, that's how we were able to determine the layers of the Earth.
I see.
So we're able to determine those different layers of stone.
The thickness based on what frequency we can get through.
Right.
Okay.
So, and you'd think like, oh, well, then wouldn't we be able to see like, oh, you hear all these sound waves and there's just this big open space in the middle. Like wouldn't we be able to detect that? But you can only send sound waves so far, and 500 miles is a long way.
500 miles
through solid material.
In fact, I can't think of a sound that went past 500 miles except maybe Krakatoa when it erupted, because that's the loudest sound in recorded, not even recorded history. This is the loudest sound in history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that went about 500 miles.
Kaboom.
But anyway.
Kaboom, baby.
Kaboom.
All right, so I'm going to spout out a lot of information real quick, so then we could talk about it. So basically, he said there was a lot of multiple layers on top of the Earth, all moving independently of each other, all making their own atmosphere. And basically, inside of this sphere, there was a civilization called so many different like accounts say like different things live there, but they call it the same thing. It's called Argatha. No, Agartha is basically the land it's called. Basically home to the Argarthians, which are these like very tall, very like gigantic type of people. And they're an ancient culture that have lived and existed for thousands of years, and are also like, they also explain a lot of the alien encounters because they're a very advanced civilization, and they're actually the caretakers. They make sure we don't kill ourselves. So that's why.
Well, they're doing a crappy job about now.
Well, the thing is, once like during World War II, after we dropped our atomic bombs on Japan, they intervened to make sure that we're not going to ever do that again, because we can't. They said, you will destroy your world and ours if you do that again. So they have intervened, and we haven't been another. We
dropped 2 atomic bombs.
I know, but since those 2, we haven't launched an attack with atomic weaponry since then.
This is eerily similar to Norse mythology, because I read through a whole book of Norse mythology. It's actually fascinating. It's just kind of a fun read.
Like Thor, Odin, all that junk.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's not at all like Marvel makes it look like. It's very, this is from a couple thousand years ago. Not even. It's like 1,500 years ago. But yeah, like they've got where the gods live, which is Asgard. There are actually supposedly 9 worlds, right? There's Midgard, which is where we are, the humans. There's Asgard, which is where the gods live, and there's Jotunheim, which is where the giants live, right? And the giants basically, there's different types of giants, and the giants basically keep the whole thing going, and the gods are at odds with the giants, and the people in Midgard are none the wiser. We just kind of like, whatever the gods decide to do, whatever the giants decide to do, if they're all at war, which is Ragnarok is the end of the world, where the giants and the gods all fight, and everything's destroyed, and we're kind of just like, well, that's what it is. So it's interesting that, like, we've got this other idea of the Agarthians, which is this race of giants that live concurrently to us, and their actions impact our actions and ours impact theirs.
So that's like one thing, is that they impact our world. Another is that they're completely separate, and it's like they're unaware of us, and we are unaware of them. Like we don't have proof that it's there, and we're completely separate. And kind of the way it works is that how this works in the most understood way is I actually have a diagram pulled up for us to look at here.
So if they don't know about us, like when the atomic bombs did drop, were they just like, you know, having tea at breakfast or whatever, and then like
just had like an earthquake or something?
Yeah, and then like a big hole was ripped through the ceiling. Like, what the hell? You know, like what's going on over there?
Keep it down.
Keep it down.
Put like a broomstick and it causes like another.
Hey, quiet,
like,
you.
If they're giants, so like they poke it up and it causes like a tidal wave.
Right. They form new mountains just by poking their broomstick.
Hey, keep it down. So here's a diagram. Let me find a better one that has a little more color. Actually, it's fine.
That's a lot of color.
So basically, come on, man. I don't care about copyright. So basically the whole civilization itself exists like on the inner layer of our outer layer. So they're kind of a inverse world.
So like they're walking upside down on our
crust,
not crust, but bedrock.
Yes. And the core acts as the sun, as their sun, the core of the earth. Yeah. And so they basically, but they're not able to them. It doesn't feel like they're walking like up a wall because it's still big enough to feel
just like if you're like, I mean, when you go to Australia, it doesn't feel like you're on the bottom of the planet. You don't feel like you're upside down.
Exactly.
You know?
So to them, they have oceans, they have a sky, they have basically everything we have, but they're just on the inside of the planet. And so then they also have, apparently they have stars and stuff, and I don't quite understand how they have that and everything, but people then have the theory. It's like, well, how do we know we're not living inside another planet? And they were like, well, that's a theory. It's a planet and a planet and a planet. More turtles on turtles kind of theory.
But we've been to space, so...
This is true, so...
That one makes me think like,
But have we been to space?
Yes.
No. Have we been to the moon?
You can literally look outside and you can see the International Space Station floating by.
Is that really there though? Okay, that's another
No,
topic.
the theory would be that we didn't land on the moon in 1969. We've definitely been to space since then, though.
Yeah, I don't believe that we haven't been to space. The moon's another story.
The flat Earth folks, this will blow the flat Earth movement wide open. Like, guys, check it out. It's not flat. It's like a rolled up tortilla, right? And so really, there's people on both sides,
so
man.
It's not a flat Earth. Think of us as a bread bowl.
Yeah, we're a bread bowl.
Honestly, yeah, think of it as a bread bowl, because how it works is that there's actually two entrances of the North Pole and the South Pole. So note how like nobody goes there. So
well, yeah,
and
there's no land on the North Pole. It's all sea ice.
Exactly, but
or ice floats, whatever they're called. I can't think of it.
So there was an account back in during World War II. So during between the time of the Great Depression and World War II, there was a man named Richard Byrd of the U.S. Navy. He was piloting an expedition to the poles. He had taken a number of trips towards the Arctic territories. He was a pilot, so he flew towards the North Pole, and he was going to set a flying record to fly over the North Pole. So, according to his alleged diary, he written during his polar flight, Boyd came across a warm, lush, as he was flying, he's flying over the North Pole. The next thing he knows, he's not over ice caps anymore. He's suddenly in a lush climate with giant mammoth-like creatures and large human-like ancient creatures that were residing on this land.
And when was this written?
In between the Great Depression and World War II. So
that's
early
weird.
1900s. So
I will say people have been to the South Pole. Like that's not an uncommon expedition, is to actually go to the South Pole.
Right.
And like it was a lot harder back then. Like Shackleton did it, and that was like in like 1901 or whatever. And that was really difficult. But now it's easier.
Well, apparently a lot of the entrances are covered.
I see.
So if you're going through this entrance, it has to be a certain way. So
if you go to the South Pole, bring yourself a shovel is the point.
Not necessarily, because the way he did it, so how these holes work is that, so sorry, flat earthers, the world is a sphere, and it all combines into this hole. So if these holes on the top and the bottom, so if you were to continuously fly north, and then there's gravity also on the inside, you would just flip into the inside without even realizing that you did that.
That's interesting.
So that's what happened to Bird. So he was flying north and just kept going and went inside the Earth. I think it's different for the South Pole because the South Pole, according to this diagram, so like see how the north is very open, but down here there's a much smaller entrance.
Which makes sense because in the north it would just be the sea, and down there's actually a landmass, Antarctica, for the South Pole.
So there's a much smaller entrance, and then there's different like cave-like entrances. One's based from like different folklore, like in certain mountains or volcanoes, things like that are also passageways to Agartha.
Interesting.
So there's so much information about this, but basically, this guy, he flew into there and he landed there. He spoke with the people and he came back, and they told the people in Agartha told them to tell the world about them. They wanted them to know they were there.
So, but for these people, it's like this tiny, dwarf flies in on a tiny little plane and gets out, and it's like, hello there. It's like, that must have freaked him out.
Well, according to the story, when he was flying, he was flying in, and they intercepted him in a saucer-shaped aircraft, a UFO.
Oh.
So, like I said, it might not be aliens. It might just be the Agarthians inside the Earth that are responsible for most UFO sightings.
Interesting.
So it's not aliens, it's inter-aliens.
Intralians.
Insideians. So technically they're just Earthlings.
Yeah, they're just like us.
Just like you and me, except really tall.
Like me.
Probably better looking.
Well, I'm not going to say that, but
like
I might get along with them a little bit better than, someone who's 5'11" and 0.99.
So they commandeered his plane and they made him land. And the Agarthians are very aware of the human race.
Was this like a police flying saucer? It's like please pull over,
Kinda.
Land your tiny plane.
You shrimp. It's like, I will step on you. Please step on me, senpai.
Oh my gosh. Whoa. That wasn't a thing in the 1920s.
Oh, you never know. Hey, I wouldn't give you for a good foot stomp.
I give you 2 dimes and a nickel.
Let me get a whiff of those jimmies.
What is that slang for?
I don't know.
Feet?
Yeah. Let me get a whiff of those tootsies.
That's there we go. That's a good one.
Okay, so this is better because it was before World War II. So the Agarthians, in Bird's diary, he expressed that the Agarthians expressed concern that the humans were going to use atomic bombs in World War II, which hadn't happened yet. And he wrote that down in his diary, saying like,
really,
these people the humans are going to use atomic bombs in some way in World War II, and they're concerned about that. And he wants me, and they want Bird to be the ambassador to the U.S. government, to tell them that we should be concerned.
So did he go to the government and be like, "Hey, you shouldn't drop an atomic bomb"?
Yeah, because he was setting a record. So when he came back, he was very concerned, and he told the government, and basically nobody believed him.
Well, of course not.
But he did go and say that. But there were some issues to his validity. So his diary entry started. This diary entry was dated February 1947. It was to be believed that Bird's inaugural flight over the North Pole, and then one. Sorry, this is Okay, so he said he made his inaugural flight, but not his record-setting one, 20 years earlier in 1926. Upon further inspection, it appears Boyd probably didn't quite reach the North Pole in his record-setting flight, instead fabricated his navigation records, poached credit from another team that actually set the record a few days later. But what makes this entry so intriguing is that if it is real, it could have potentially been misconstrued from a later mission to Antarctica.
Well, here's where I'm like, if it was dated 1947, that was after we dropped the atomic bomb because we dropped it in 1945.
True.
So he may have been like, "Oh, hey, I had news about this before it happened," but he really told everyone after it happened. So like he might have just been saying that.
That's one of the bigger like accounts, but again, it's
that is interesting. Though.
It's interesting, but it's easily kind of debatable and it's very inconsistent. And another big theory is that the Nazis actually reached the center of the earth, and there's documentation to show that it might have happened. So
I need to see this.
You know that the Nazis were into some weird shit.
Dude.
They were trying all sorts of stuff, experiments and all kinds of crazy stuff, and that we Americans hired Nazi scientists to do our crazy experiments later after the wars.
That's another theory I was going to talk about on Minesweeper, but that is 100% true. If you didn't know that, Nazi scientists after World War II, some were recruited by the U.S. government and later contributed to the project known as MK Ultra.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yep,
MK
that's
crazy.
True. That's not even a theory. That's 100% true.
So how the Nazis got there? So they were wanting to explore the Arctic regions as well because they wanted to set up bases and test some novelty weaponry and some experimental weaponry. And this is also, all of this was documented by Hitler himself. There's also some theories to say that Hitler actually came from the Argatha and is a demon, but blah, blah, blah. That's a little out there. They say this is a deeper rabbit hole, but people do say that. But regardless, there was a Nazi map that was believed to be instructions on how to reach Agartha. And supposedly there was a letter sent from a German U-boat navigator named Karl Unger, who claims that U-209 made it to Agartha and the Earth is in fact hollow. This letter also mentions that the notorious German Gens? I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
Karl Haushofer and Rudolf Hess.
Maybe it's shortened from generals.
I guess so. Blah blah blah.
Maybe shortened from genitals.
I don't know. It says the notorious. So there's this picture here, but it won't let me make it bigger.
No, notorious.
Okay. There is ample evidence that the Nazis spent a lot of resources researching for Agartha, and their last report from Hitler to escape in case of a dire emergency was warranting these conspiracies. In fact, most common diagrams of Agartha were drawn by German scientists in 1935. Evidence also exists that Nazis may have believed to have already lived inside of the Earth. Some experiments of the Third Reich show a belief the Earth was a concave shape and that we reside in the interior of a sphere. In a bizarre 1942 experiment conducted by Nazi scientists, Heinz Fischer on the island of Rügen, a team attempted to observe a British fleet by pointing the lens of their infrared equipment up at a 45-degree angle. They believed that though the Earth was concave, normal rays were refracted off the ocean, but infrared rays were not. Of course, they saw only sky, but this shows that they believed and searched for evidence of alternative Earth theories.
Interesting.
So, and then it goes on to say there's proof in ancient cultures, such as folklore and other diagrams drawn by like ancient civilizations, showing like that other names for this civilization is Atlantis.
Bringing it all together now.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of evidence to show that this is a theory. I find it very far-fetched, but it is so intriguing how much information through the centuries that there is.
Right.
And they all have a different take on it. So it could be something else, but they all kind of lead to the same conclusion, that there's this mystical land somewhere on Earth.
And I think that's what makes it a fascinating theory, is that it does span the entirety of human existence almost, and because of that, it has almost a credibility to it, but it's also so far fetched that it sounds like it's almost entirely fantasy, right?
Yeah, it
But
really does.
it does make it also really intriguing. I will say, I guess I could do this for another mind sweeper later. I can get more into it, but Atlantis never existed and it was never meant to exist. Just point that out. The story of Atlantis was an allegory done by Plato. And it was never meant to like talk about a real physical place. Kind of like everyone's familiar with Plato's, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave. It wasn't talking about a literal cave. It was just, this is to tell the moral of the story, right? So Atlantis was the city on a hill. It had everything. And that, because of their great pride, they suffered and were sunk into the ocean. I mean, I haven't read it in a long time, but, that's another one that Atlantis was never actually meant to describe a real place, but maybe that doesn't mean it's not true.
It doesn't mean there weren't civilizations that were
Yeah.
lost that we don't know about.
Just because Plato didn't talk about it as a real place doesn't mean we might not actually find a place that was like that. No,
He could have, like, even Atlantis back when Plato was around could have already been lost and was just a relevant fact. Like, hey, remember those Atlanteans? They were stupid and they killed themselves. Like, I'm going to make a parable out of it.
Yeah, it's possible.
Like, remember them? They had everything. They were great. Remember, you took a vacation to Atlantis, didn't you, Jim?
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, yeah, it was great. Yeah. And then what happened?
Oh, well, me and the kids got real sunburn that vacation.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't have anything. We don't have sunscreen or aloe vera over here, so we're just kind of. I mean, 2 of them died. I mean, what were we supposed to do?
I'm dying right now.
I'm laying here. My arms are already falling off, and the rest of me's going pretty quick.
Jim, you've had a great life. You're 26. You're about to die.
That's true. I lived longer than most. Lived way longer than my pa.
That's right. So what did they do? They got greedy and they killed themselves. Yep. Remember whenever Jesus made those people turn to salt and the city burned? That's what happened to Atlantis. Don't do bad stuff. All right.
That's not at all the story.
It's like, I don't know. I believe in science.
No, but
donations.
Remember when Jesus turned people to salt and made the city burn?
What was his name? Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's not
Sodomy and Gomorrah.
Oh man. So yeah, that's it. That is interesting though. The theory, the Hollow Earth theory, it ties in well with Jules Verne, I think, and maybe good old Jules knew more than he was letting on.
I'll leave us off with this last tidbit of information if y'all want to learn more. There's actually a website called ourhollowearth.com, and it is about a book written by a man.
Yep, good.
He basically wrote a whole book on Hollow Earth, and this website is very old, but it's basically a whole book dedicated to accounts and how to find Hollow Earth. Like, he gives one example of this man named Olaf Jensen and his father Jens Jansen.
Well, because if he has a Scandinavian, if he's Scandinavian, it's like it's Jen's son is his last name. Like they don't have proper last names.
Well, he's a Norwegian fisherman.
Yeah, Norwegian. Yeah.
So they accidentally discovered the North Polar opening in 1829 in search of the quote chosen ones. One of their ancestors and entered the Hollow Earth where they lived for 2 years with the giant people there. Olaf then returned to Sweden as a snowman. No, I'm kidding.
I did not expect that, actually.
He returned to Sweden by way of the South Polar opening after being rescued by a Scotland whale boat from an iceberg. His father was killed when their fishing boat was struck and sunk by the iceberg in Antarctica. Olaf later immigrated to the United States and died in Los Angeles in 1908. There's actually a YouTube video and a recording of Olaf Jansen telling his story of how he lived inside the earth for 2 years.
Can we hear some of this?
Let me see if it pulls it up. If it's still, yeah.
Like, are we going to be able to get the audio in the podcast?
It is a 2-hour video.
2 hours. Okay,
Yes.
Maybe not. But if you want to delve deeper.
It is on, it is an entire audiobook. It is called The Smoky God, or A Voyage Journey to the Inner Earth, written by Wilma George Emerson, an account of Olaf Jensen. Okay, go give that a listen. The full book is on YouTube to listen to.
The full thing. So, I mean, honestly, for me, like, I don't think it's real, but I kind of want to go on an expedition just to see what I see, you know?
Honestly,
I want to go to the North Pole.
There's a lot about Antarctica I could talk about too, which we'll have to
Yes.
get into another time.
Another time.
Like, there's a lot. It's interesting. And again, a lot of it is, these theories are just so crazy, but they're so interesting just because of the sheer amount of information there is. Like, other ones we've talked about are very now and very base level, whereas these ones have like histories of facts.
Right.
So it's interesting. But that's all I've got. If you have any more info or any cool tidbits about Hollow Earth.
Has anybody met these giants?
I'm talking to one right now.
I'm one of them. You can talk to me.
Next time we'll talk about Hollow Moon. Yes, that's a real theory. Hollow Moon.
I have heard that theory too, but we'll talk about that next time. Yeah, no, I mean, I was the equivalent of dropped off at the fire station for the giants. You know, they were just like, get rid of this
The
one.
New York Giants?
No, the ones inside the earth. That's probably where I was born, and they were just like, get rid of this one, and they just, threw me into St. Louis, Missouri, because that's like, to them, they're just like, somebody will find them.
Funny thing, the Native Americans actually thought there was an entrance to Hollow Earth in the Missouri River.
Really?
At the peak of the Missouri River, and from the mountain that
that's way easier to get to, dude. Let's go check it out.
Yeah, they said like at the peak where the river starts, kind of from the mountaintop where all the snow flows.
Yeah, from the Ozarks.
Yeah, so they say there's an entrance there. So that's where he came from.
Let's go on an expedition.
Let's do it.
To the Ozarks, and we'll call it a vacation, so our wives will be willing to come along too. And we'll take a camera.
They'll come, stay in a nice hotel. We'll be gone for 2 weeks, and then we'll disappear forever.
And we'll live among the giants for the rest of our lives. All right, thank you guys for listening to the ZEITGUYS. We will see you next time, or you'll hear from us next time, I guess.
Yeah, but we'll see you.
We'll see you. You won't see us.
We're always watching.
But we'll see you.
Always watching.